Daniel, how are you on this fine Monday morning?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Awesome. I'm very excited for this conversation. When you and I spoke on the phone uh, prior to just a few minutes ago, your story blew me away. And I can't wait for people to hear this. Because to me, it almost feels like Michael Singer surrender experiment level. How is this possible? Um, I'm sort of leading the witness a little bit, but for those who don't know you, why don't we start with a little bit about what you do today, and then maybe we circle all the way to the front of the story as to kind of how you got there.
Excellent. Well, if you would have asked me a few months ago what I did, I would tell you that I facilitate transformational healing work for people. And recently, I've come to reinvent my relationship again to what I do, and I call it transformational creation work with people. Because what I've learned is that healing is not really, we're already healed and we don't need to heal. We just need to remember that we're healed and create our lives from that perspective. And that can still be done in a very sensitive, trauma informed way. It can still be done with love and compassion. But a caterpillar doesn't transform into a butterfly because something's wrong, right? It liberates itself from its restraints and it transcends into a new reality. And so, one thing that I've really come clear on is that healing without a vision for your life can be very limiting, and you can shift your circumstances and conditions, but find yourself in the same experiences over and over again. And what I'm committed to is helping people create whole new realities in their lives and step into an embodiment of potential that they didn't know was possible before.
So, can we unpack that a little bit? Because
Sure,
I think I understand what you mean, but I'm not positive that everyone may.
sure.
So, when you say that everyone is already healed, the way
hmm
I interpret that is at our core, we are all divine beings that are just pure love and light. And it is a distortion of perspective that sort of stacks on top of that, that gives the impression that we are less than or hurt or whatever. And if you can zoom out far enough and become detached from those things, then you can kind of fall back into that sort of divine perfection. And from there, start to work your way through the things that cognitively impair you, let's say.
Sure. I'd agree with that. I say that's accurate. And how I would say the same thing you are, right? Just from my lens, is that we're not like, I'm not the mind and I'm not the body.
Right.
I'm the consciousness inside of my inside, right? And so it's kind of like if you look at when you're driving your car, you know, when you're driving your car, you think you're actually one, right? You're staring at the road and you lose perception and you feel like you're just one steering the car, but you're not actually the car, right? You're not the engine and you're not, the mechanics of the car. You're just the one steering the car. And so we have the ability to navigate our lives from that perspective where, you know, the brain, the body just operates off programming. And that programming is what we need to be open to receive, but from a very neutral perspective. And we need to not judge that programming and the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that come up, but instead respond to it from as an authentic perspective of ourselves and an authentic understanding of what our mission and what our purpose is here on the planet to do. And so, um, pain is inevitable, right? Like pain is actually a part of the transformational process, but suffering is optional. And the challenge that we face is that when we don't create our lives or even do healing work from the place of I am healed, right? It doesn't matter how amazing your tools are. It doesn't matter what kind of knowledge you're applying to the present moment. It doesn't matter what practice you do. If you're doing it all from I'm not enough and I need to change something about myself, then you're changing to avoid. And
Right.
so even though consciously, right, your focus and your energy is going on to creating what you want, you're doing it from a place of what you don't want, and therefore your energy is going into what you don't want. And so you just keep recreating the same circumstances and conditions, excuse me, the same experiences just through different circumstances and conditions over and over and over again. And you never get to actually experience a new reality and a new experience of yourself. And so that's what I mean, is that we don't need to change anything about who we are. We need to love who we are. And the more we try to change what we are and who we are, the more resistance we actually create to opening up to this whole amazing world that's here for us.
And if folks have ever looked into manifesting deeply, they likely would have come across some of those concepts before. Would you say that's fair?
Sure. Yeah. I would agree with that. I'd say that we all develop a different relationship to manifestation, right? We all, at first, it's all about like forcing and controlling, right? And then I think that people eventually get to a certain level where it goes from manifesting to magnetization, right? And they understand that my true work is to magnetize my energy. And through magnetizing my energy and then taking aligned action, I will automatically manifest everything I could have wanted, plus things that I didn't even know were available or within me.
I love that. And when you said pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, do you get the impression that suffering comes from the attempt to avoid pain?
Yes, I believe my experience, right? I'm just one experience, but my experience is that suffering comes from not accepting what is, right?
Yeah.
Trying to change what is and not accepting what is. Another way to say it is wanting things to be different than what
Yeah.
they are. But here's the thing. I think that our suffering comes from not acknowledging that our entire existence on this planet is a paradox. And what do I mean by that? Okay, we are energetic beings in a physical human body. And so, what I found on my journey was, and what I guide other people through, is that we begin our journey and we focus on really the depth of our humanity, right? We don't really understand or know that there's this whole spiritual component to the universe and to the world that we live in. And so we eventually reach our limit on this spectrum of humanity to where it doesn't work and we're in so much pain. And then we open up to these spiritual experiences and this awakening. And what we do is, because we open up to something new, all of a sudden it's just like total bliss and total freedom, right? Like we just have all access to all these things that we've wanted for so long, but couldn't find. And then what we do is we make everything about our humanity wrong, right? And we're like, we make agreements like, I'm never going to do that again. That's wrong. That's bad, right? And instantly, as we open up to this whole new level of freedom, right, we automatically just start putting ourselves into resistance and opposition. And that's when, like, all of a sudden we'll reach a limit where our spirituality like starts to limit us as well. And so what I think the root of our suffering is when we either relate to us as only spiritual or only human, instead of learning to integrate both into one cohesive experience. And so there's things that from a spiritual perspective, like, you can justify and rationalize, but you are never going to get your human on board, right? Like when I became homeless and lost all my money, there was a lot of gifts and a lot of power that came in that. But I was never going to be okay going from a millionaire to living off $5 a day. And the more that I tried to make myself be okay with living off $5 a day and using spiritual practices and wisdom to convince myself of that, the more I was actually denying my spirituality and my humanity. And so I think that we have a depth to our humanity, a height to our spirituality, and suffering comes from when we only try to live either in a spiritual or human world rather than bringing them both together in an integrated, cohesive experience that honors both.
Amazing. I love everything you just said.
Thank you.
And I had my first, I'm sure it's first of many layers, tussle with that a couple of years ago when I came to the conclusion that, oh, I'm gonna destroy my ego, and that will help me, raise up. And boy, it is astonishing the ways in which the ego will fight to preserve itself and just tripwire you left, right, and center. And it's like, oh, you want to just raise up, then just exit the game. You'll go back and you'll come back somewhere, some other version. But if you're going to be here, you got to play within the construct of the rules. You can't just
Sure.
flip the Monopoly table.
Yeah, absolutely. And for parents out there, right, or people who've done a lot of inner child work, you can understand this. If your 3-year-old is crying, you're not going to tell your 3-year-old, "Oh, turn that over to source." Right? You're going to go right, go turn that over to source, right? You're going to go pick up your 3-year-old and you're going to give your 3-year-old every ounce of human, like whatever the depths of human need that your 3-year-old is asking for, you're going to give it to them. You're not going to be like, go ask source for it, right? And so that's what I feel like we do as humans when we get older and we get into our spiritual practice. We want to just leave our human suffering and its human needs and be like, you're wrong, you're bad, because you wanted all this for so long and it created so much pain, and you found this freedom when you started to open up to your spirituality. So you're bad and wrong for wanting this thing. And actually, I think that's the furthest thing from the truth. I think that, like, to honor the height of our spirituality, right, is to literally observe and to be present and to fulfill every single desire that our human could ever imagine without judging it, but also to applying the wisdom to understand what is the true desire and what is the healthiest way to fulfill that desire, that's going to not only give me what I want now, but keep me in alignment with my mission and my vision and my values and my purpose.
And the desire piece is another little mind fuck when you're coming into this spiritual world, because you start to realize, like, oh, well, surrender is the path of, least resistance and following the universe's will or God's will or whatever you want to call it. And all divinity is pointed away from me and instead focus on the we. And again, is that paradox of like, okay, but if you do that, all of your humanity, all of the pieces that are anchoring you into this experience kind of start to shrivel and panic. And it's really difficult, this notion of managing both things at once. Because I love the word that you use. It's a paradox. All of it is a paradox, right?
Yeah,
Feminine, masculine, all these things. It's like, okay, how do I do both of these things, the middle path, all at the same time, and surf that wave that the universe puts in front of me?
absolutely. And it's ironic, right? Like, before, on my journey, I've been a millionaire and I've been homeless. And before I had millions of dollars, my self-worth was just rooted in shame and guilt, not feeling worthy because I didn't have the aesthetics and I didn't have the money and I didn't have the job title, right? I didn't have all the things that I needed to have, that society had taught me and that my life had taught me that I needed in order to feel worthy, right? And then all of a sudden my life transformed. I had millions of dollars, I had it all, and yet I still felt the same shame I felt when I didn't have it, just through a different experience, right?
Right.
And so that is something that's been a massive gift to have experienced so young in my life, is that shame is shame, right? It's shame is shame. The mind is going to assign whatever story it wants to assign to try to control the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts around the shame. But you're basically fucked if you do and fucked if you don't, unless you realize how to navigate this paradox of being an energetic being in a human body. And that is essential to flourish and thrive and have it all in our lifetime.
So I'm sure people are curious and intrigued by those two endpoints that you shared a couple times, homeless and millionaire. And in between those things, the topic of shame. So how were you built as a young man? How do you think you came to be convinced at a primal, energetic level that you weren't enough?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I was born to do what I do. I was born to a mom who, while she was pregnant with me, had two miscarriages before me, right? Because she was a drug addict and because she had severe eating disorder. And then when I was born under the belief system that my purpose was to sacrifice my needs for my mother's needs because I wasn't important. So, starting as early as I can remember, I was that little boy running around the back of the Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, you
Mm.
know, and that was my life, right? Was visiting my mom at rehab because she was at a countless number of rehabs, and that's how I spent my weekends, was at the therapist's office waiting for my mom to come out, then my dad to come out, then my sister to come out, and then on the weekend, because my parents had this amazing home, right? All the people from NA and AA would be at our house. And I remember being like 7 years old, and there would be people sitting there talking to their sponsors about where they're at in their life. And I would be eavesdropping, and I would hear what they were saying. And in my mind, I would be giving these people guidance and advice that I didn't know where it came from, but I
Wow.
would just be giving these people. And then I'd hear the sponsor talk, and it would be very close to what I would say. And so from a very young age, because of my mom's eating disorder and because of her drug addiction, I learned that my needs come last, and that, like, you're a label, right? Everything is about being an addict or not being an addict, and everything is about healing, right? Like, you're not worthy unless you're healing, but the problem is, like, you're never going to feel healed because pain is never going to go away, and pain is part of growth, not an opposition. And what I've learned later is that because of the way the human mind works and relates to the unknown, the crazy thing is that, you know, we want to be in higher states of consciousness, right? But the irony is, we have these big releases and these transformations, and we go to a higher state of consciousness. But that's the thing we fear the most, because once we actually go to a higher state of consciousness, we've had to leave behind so much. And now we don't know who we are anymore unless we're creating to avoid everything that we just left behind. And so we're in the unknown, the mind kicks in, and it wants to start creating thoughts to drop us back down into those lower states of consciousness. And so,
Mm.
like, I just learned that, like, healing is where you get your worth and value from. And unless you have problems and unless you have drama, from being in these meetings and around, you know, all these people my whole life, that, like, there is nothing else to life besides that. And, like, who has time for fun and joy and play? Because I have to heal, and I have to fix everything that I just screwed up about my life because I'm a drug addict. And so I've been blessed not to have been a drug addict or taken that path, but I've been addicted to my mind and addicted to unworthiness. And, you know, I think we're all addicted to something, but fortunately I haven't been addicted to drugs and alcohol, but I might as well have been, based on the environment that I grew
Yeah.
up in.
So how did that show up as pathology in your teens?
Well, of course, my parents' greatest fear was that I was going to be like them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what do? They can only see the world through, he's going to be an addict. How do I prevent him from being an addict? Rather than seeing me from, like, who I really am and what my real needs are. They're
Right.
so busy trying to avoid their guilt and shame, right? That they can't see me for who I truly am and what my real needs are. And then they don't want to feel the pain that I feel, because that means they have to face more things about their life that they feel incomplete about. And so, you know, I would get in trouble for the smallest little things, like, you know, I smoked weed a couple times, right? Or I would sell weed, but I never did drugs or was addicted to drugs. And, you know, but starting at age 14, I was sent away to, like, those wilderness schools for bad kids. And I was
Mm.
sent away to rehabs for, like, smoking weed, just like that. And so how that impacted me was, my parents didn't even want to deal with me. I was just sent away to places that were horrific, right? That some of the places, you know, I wasn't, yeah, just really horrific places with horrific experiences for teens. And so
It's
that's how
interesting because when you describe like a wilderness, like not knowing anything about it and never having been myself, it's like, that sounds nice. Like, wait, you don't
yeah.
have to sit behind a desk all day. You can go be outside and do stuff. Like, it sounds nice. What
Right.
is the actual experience like?
The actual experience is, you arrive, like, this one place I was at, was called Hidden Lake Academy. If you can look it up online, I mean, it's got horrible things that have been said about it. But you know, you get there, and the first thing they do is they pull you in a room. And here I am. I got there when I was 16, right? And that was just the place, that was the third or fourth place that I'd been. And you get there and they pull you into a room, and the first thing you got to do is strip down and take off all your clothes in front of people that you don't know. And
Jesus.
they strip search you to make sure you don't have contraband on you, to make sure you don't have weapons on you, to make sure there's no drugs. And then in addition to that, they say, oh, give us all your clothes. Like, you can't have any name brand clothes. You can't have any name brand toiletries. You have to have no identity whatsoever because everything about you is bad and wrong. And your polo shirt or your t-shirt that says Nike on it it's an identity. And that's bad and wrong because it's what got you here. So you have to have very plain clothes. So you don't really get to have a sense of creative expression,
Mm.
right? You don't get to have a sense of like, this is who I am. It's more of everything that I am is wrong because it's what got me here. And these are contributing factors. And then, you're escorted everywhere, right? So you're escorted in groups and you're escorted by these counselors. And then these counselors, they're power hungry, right?
Mm.
They're there's the therapeutic counselors and then there's the staff. Okay. So the therapeutic counselors, I was blessed to have really, really amazing therapeutic counselors, but 95% of them were just power hungry and they just wanted to like, yeah, just they had their own shit that they were projecting onto us. And you're out there. It's fun to be in the woods, but if if you wake up and you're taken out and you're told for 8 hours you have to chop a tree down, it's this huge, massive tree and rip these stumps out, and you can't eat or you can't move until you do that because a counselor didn't like the way that you looked at them or you said something that they felt was out of agreement or inappropriate, like that's not a fun experience to have in the wilderness. I remember my worst case was I got in trouble with a few other kids. People got to go home for Christmas break and I didn't. I had to stay and somebody stole the baby Jesus statue in the lodge. And I remember we were out from like 3 in the morning till 7 in the morning on Christmas in Dahlonega, Georgia, in push-up position on ice cold concrete in negative-degree weather until somebody admitted that they took the statue. And of course, nobody admitted it, and nobody would snitch on anybody else. So we were just in really abusive, like traumatic situations that no child deserved to be in.
That sounds like a story that would have happened like 50 years ago, or 70 years ago. Like that does not sound like a modern tale in America. That's wild.
It is. It is. I remember they like one time I remember having clean the dumpster at the cafeteria, but they gave us toothbrushes and they threw us in the dumpster and said, clean it out with toothbrushes. And I just remember um, the kid next to me just throwing up so much that we couldn't even clean the dumpster because he was just throwing up so much. And you're talking to the counselor, and if you talk to them and say, I can't do this or I don't want to do this, they tell you, they call it you're resisting, right? And then you get further punishment and consequences as a result. So
Whose
it's
brilliant idea was it that this was somehow going to be useful to somebody? This is a wild concept.
yeah, it's a wild concept developed by educational consultants, right? So I'm happy to fry his ass online. His name is Len Buccellato, and the headmaster's name was Rudy Bentz. And what they did was they would go out to these educational consultants. Len Buccellato was the owner of the school, but he was an educational consultant. Rudy was the headmaster, and they'd go out, and parents are looking to find their kids the best path to college and career that they want. And part of that path is what high school do I send my child to, right? So they went out to all these educational consultants all over the country and they said, hey, you're going to get kids that come in where they're troubled and they have issues. You need to convince the parents to send them here. And so while I don't have proof of it, I'm sure there was a lot of bribes and kickbacks going on to these educational consultants because they love to send your kids to these places.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry for you and everybody else who had to go through that. Um, I appreciate that it also created the you that's here today, right?
Yeah,
So pain equals growth, but
absolutely.
it's just
Yeah,
sad. It's
I
sad to
wouldn't
think about
trade
that
for the
many
world.
people going through that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I wouldn't trade it for the world, though. I really wouldn't. It made me strong. And, would I like to have my childhood back? I don't know, because to be, 44 years old and have the ability and the awareness and operate from the place that I do, while I feel like a lot of people go through like a big midlife crisis at my age, to be just so crystal clear and so empowered and so tuned in and be able to have the rest of my life to create it as anything that I want. I don't know. Fair exchange to me.
Nice. So you survive this hellscape.
Yep.
How many years did you have to go through that?
So it was an 18-month program, right? Like that's how they sold it, was an 18-month program. But you have to go through it as a peer group. So you have to wait. So you go there, but you have to wait until you get like 16 people or however many people in your peer group. So I was there for about 4 months before my time even started because I had to wait
Jeez.
for all the kids to come in for the peer group. And so I was there for about 20, 24 months, 20, 23, 24 months.
Wow. So did you have a senior year of high school then, or did this end your high school career?
No, this ended. I graduated 2 weeks. 2 weeks after I turned 18 is when I left the school.
So are you actually learning anything there, or are you just chopping wood and throwing up in dumpsters? Like, this seems like a very bizarre situation.
It's very bizarre. So the schedule was really interesting. We would only go to school from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and we
Okay.
would only go to school from like 9 o'clock in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. And Monday was spent all day in this thing called realizations, which is basically like group therapy with your peer group. And then you would do like physical outdoor stuff the rest of the day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you go to school, outdoor stuff. And then Friday, again, you're in realizations. And then Wednesday, you would spend the whole half a day in group realizations, which you now went into therapy with other kids instead of your peer group. And it was a very interesting experience. So education was the least priority of this place.
Hmm.
And it was more about the therapeutic aspect of the school.
Do you think that it originally started with a positive intention that got corrupted by other people's wounds and their inability to separate themselves from their own pathologies?
You know, I don't believe that people, I don't believe that anybody started down this path because they wanted to hurt. I believe that people wanted to do well and they had a personal experience or were exposed to something where they believed they thought that this type of environment and this type of path was the best thing. And I also think that somewhere along the way in that process, that greed gets involved,
Mm,
right?
yep.
And I don't like saying this because I don't like to think that I'm a victim or anybody's a victim, right? Like this is just the way the world is and it makes us into who we are, but we do need to honor our experiences and I didn't have choice and I didn't have control and so I need to honor that part of me and for all the other kids who go through similar things and the trauma that we experience, right? But I'd like to think that initially it was started with good intentions, and there's just different belief systems about what works and what doesn't. And
Mm.
people who started these places came from a very misguided belief system on what works.
Sounds like it. Okay, so you graduate. Do you go to college or do you start working?
I graduate, I start working because I'm out in the summer, and then I go to school, I go to college, and I'm in college for about I don't know, within the first year, and I got kicked out of college, right? Coming from the school, it was like freedom shock, right?
Right.
Like freedom shock, right? Well, I never got to go to prom. I never got to choose the food, like even eating like good food. Like we had just had shit food every day from the cafeteria, and so it's like total freedom shock. And so my ability to focus on anything other than like just being free and like letting these desires be expressed that I just had to suppress for the past like 2 years of my life. So my priorities were misaligned. And also too, like my behavior was very poor. And I got involved in some things and, I got into a fight and some other things. And eventually the school found out about it because it happened on the dorms that were off property. And they said, hey, look, we don't want to tell your parent, like we don't want to write a letter to your parents, even though I'm 18. They're like, we're either going to expel you or we need you to resign. What do you want to choose to do? And so I obviously didn't want to get an expulsion on my record. And so I chose to resign and quit.
So where'd you go from there? Do you go back home with your parents? Do you tell them? Do you make up a story?
Yeah, of course. I definitely lied. I definitely lied to my parents. I definitely lied to my parents. I got a job working for a mortgage company, right? I needed to find a job. I got a job working for a mortgage company
What year is
as
this?
this is, I can't remember the exact year, but I can tell you that I was 19 years old,
Okay.
right? So I don't comprehend like time like that, but I can tell you I was 19 years
Yeah.
old.
So this is
And
90s.
yeah, yeah,
This is
it's still
way
in,
pre like subprime mortgage scenario because I was in
oh, yeah.
mortgages for a while around that era, and that's its
Uh,
own.
yeah, it was 98, I think 98 or 99. So what was really hot was these VA streamline loans, right? And so people who were veterans, right? The VA automatically guaranteed their mortgage based on, their veteran eligibility, and they're good deals, right? Like people could drop 3 points on their interest rate, skip 2 months mortgage payments, they
No
could get
money
their
down.
escrow refunded. So like it was really good deal. Like you were really actually helping people at that point in the game in the mortgage business. And here I am, um I'm working as an assistant to the processor, just doing some file work because I needed a job. And I hear all these loan officers, they're like in their late 20s, right? They're driving BMW M3s. They're
Yeah.
making like 20, 30 grand a month, right? And here I am, I'm like, I'm listening to them on the phone for like 3 months. And I'm like, I can do this, right? And so I went to the owner of the mortgage company and I'm like, hey, put me on the phone, do this. And I did pretty well. Like my first few months, I started to do well. And then somebody recruited me to come work at a different mortgage company. And I went to work there and they had this, and that's where things kind of went downhill because it wasn't VA streamline, it was conventional. That was a
Mm.
different skill set, different eligibility. And so it wasn't just like this really easy way to do it. And so I stopped making money and I started selling drugs and doing other things again you know, to to live my life at that point.
So now you're in your 20s, early 20s.
I'm about 19 and 20. Yeah, 19 years old still.
Okay. And your soul is observing these, we'll call them suboptimal choices, right? In terms
Yup.
of drug dealing. So you're
Mhm.
accruing more guilt, if not shame, because you know what's going on, even though you might be blocking it consciously. So you're taking on
Sure.
that extra load. Plus, you still have all your childhood stuff that presumably has not been addressed in any way.
Absolutely. And I would say that guilt and shame looks very different at that age, right? Guilt and shame doesn't look like I'm not worthy, right? Guilt and shame just looks like I need to be this person so I can have what I want, right? And so, yes, guilt and shame is 100% there, but the narrative that plays out of guilt and shame at 19 and 20 years old is so much different than the guilt and shame of like 30 or, even 40 years old or even in your late 20s. And so for me, it was just like, I don't fit in, or it's like, oh, I want to have this and I want to have that. I got to do these things so I can be this person. But
Right.
I wasn't really aware that I felt guilt and shame around myself at that point. I just wanted things and I wanted them.
So what happens next? So you're side hustling, you're sliding down the rankings as a loan officer.
Mhm.
Where do you go from there?
Every morning I go to this deli right next door. Like I'm talking about right next door to the mortgage company, and there's this young, beautiful girl behind the counter. And every morning I go in and I order my bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, and she serves it to me with a smile. And one day, after probably a month and a half of this process of doing this, um, I go outside the mortgage company to smoke a cigarette. She comes outside and talks to me, and she goes, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" And I
Wow.
said, I don't know. And she said, well, do you want to come to my work? Do you want to come to my work? And I'm like, what are you, a bartender? Like, I'm like, what are you, a bartender, right? I can't drink. She's like, don't worry about it. Come. And, she was a dancer, but it wasn't like a totally nude place. She was a dancer. And I walked in with like three of my friends and we got kicked out within the first 10 minutes because one of my friends said something ignorant, but I did get to see her for a few minutes. She saw that I came, and then that was kind of it. And then I think it was like a week later, she beeped me. We had pagers then, right? She
Wow.
beeped me and she was like, hey, I'm getting ready to go to New York, but I'd love to come and see you for a few minutes. And so I remember I was watching a movie with a friend. I walked out of the movie theater just to go say hi to her, And I just remember my heart busted open. I was like, wow, this girl, like my heart busted open. And then next thing you know, we're in a relationship. And next thing you know, 3 months into the relationship, she's pregnant. She's pregnant with my daughter.
So some of that chopped up because of I don't know whose internet connection, but I heard you came outside the movie theater, your heart's busted open, and some months later you now have a child with this
Pretty
woman who
much.
was making bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches next door
Yes.
to your loan officer.
Yeah, she wasn't making them, she was serving them. But yeah,
Sure.
basically she worked at the deli during the day. She was a dancer at night. We fell in love 3 months after being together. Um, she's pregnant with my daughter.
Amazing. So how did you stay together? Did she have the baby? How did that all play out?
Yeah, no, we stayed together. We stayed together. Obviously, she stopped dancing, and I remember it was, I'll never forget it. It was December 31st, New Year's Eve, 1999. And I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do with my life? Right. Here I am. I'm 20 or 9, whatever, 20 years old. And I got a baby coming. What am I going to do? And so I had no clue what I was going to do, but I knew that my cousin, my stepfather's cousin, was opening up a car dealership. He owned a huge body shop and towing company, and he was growing his business, and he's going to open up a car dealership, and you know it was in some of the rougher parts of Baltimore City. And so I called him up, and he said, "Hey, I hired this guy to run the dealership. Call him. I'll put in a good word." And so I applied to get a job working at the car dealership, and I got hired as a salesperson.
I'm uncomfortable with the amount of parallels with my life. I also sold cars for several years. This is very interesting. Okay, so now you're slinging metal in a dicey area of Baltimore.
Yeah.
You've got either a new baby on the way or a baby's just here. How are you feeling at that point? Are you
Well,
comfortable, relaxed, like, oh, this is going to be great? Or are you daily having anxiety attacks and constantly trying to crawl your way out of an emotional hole?
yeah, I'm petrified. There's a lot of significant things that happen. So I start working at this car dealership. Within the first month, the the owner, um, I just couldn't connect with the people, and I couldn't sell a car, right? And I mean, here I am. I'm a white boy in the hood of Baltimore City, right? And the owner just calls me into his office. He became one of my greatest mentors. But he calls me into his office, and he called me babe. He goes, look, babe. He goes, every time a customer walks on that lot, it's $400. That's how much the dealership spends to get them in here. He goes, so you're not getting any credit applications from them, and you're not selling any cars. He goes, you're not allowed to talk about price. He goes, if you talk about price with a customer before you have a credit app, and they get in their car and they leave, just get in your car and go with them. You're gone. He goes, you're fired. Right. And he goes, as a matter of fact, give me your price sheet. He goes, you are not allowed to talk about the cars with anybody who comes on the lot. You better find out a way to match up and build a connection with these people and get them to come in the showroom and fill out a credit app, or you're fired. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My girlfriend's pregnant. So I don't know. Somehow I figured it out really quick, right? And I remember I was so scared that next customer that came on the lot, but I did it. I figured out how to build a bond and rapport, and I did it again and again and again and again and again. And what he did was he really simplified the process, right? Like nobody was going to do anything with me unless I learned how to build an authentic connection. I already had the odds stacked against me based
Yep.
on the neighborhood I was in and the color of my skin. And but I did it, and I started to thrive. And so I started to sell cars, but I wasn't making that much money, right? I was making like a few $1,000s a month. My girlfriend also had a son who was 2 years old, in addition to the baby on the way, and she stopped having income coming in. So I was really supporting all of them. And then I get a call one day from her neighbor saying, all your shit's getting thrown out on the lawn. You need to come home. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, all your stuff's getting evicted. And I didn't know. I thought my girlfriend was just handling all of, like, just handling it, right? She never asked me for money. I thought she had the rent and I was covering all the other expenses and things like that. And just, we didn't know how to communicate. I mean, I'm 19 years old, right?
Right.
I'm like, right? No excuse. But so it turns out she didn't pay the rent. We got evicted. She didn't ask me for help. She didn't ask me for money, just for communication. So here we are, baby on the way. We just got evicted from our apartment. And we move in with her mom, who lives now an hour away from my work, but who was kind enough and willing to give us her home to live in and support us. So those are some really life transforming experiences that happened in that time period as well.
So you didn't like just take a rapid plunge to the bottom and bounce up. Like you took the scenic route down and around. This is fascinating. Okay. So
Yeah.
now you're living in soon to be baby mama's house
Uh-huh.
and you're commuting an hour a week to a job where you can't weaponize your white privilege.
Nope.
We can get into that at some point. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna take a detour on that.
All right.
Privilege is circumstantial.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of privilege. It absolutely exists. Pretty people privilege, right? But it's being white is not a universal, continuous stream of privilege, right? And you're giving the 100% perfect example. It's like, okay, you're trying to sell cars in a neighborhood where you look different. That is not a privilege,
Mm-hmm.
right?
No.
If I'm a pretty girl at the bar at 10 o'clock and it's crowded and I want a drink, I have privilege. If I'm a
Mm-hmm.
pretty girl at 2:30 in the morning in the alley by myself, I don't have privilege, right? Everything is super circumstantial. Anyway, mini detour.
Mini detour. I hear that. Here's the thing that I learned. Here's the thing that I learned really quick that made me really successful. I learned how to build bond and rapport over being authentic, right?
Mm.
And so here was my sales pitch that I told the people. I said, look, here's the deal. You have challenge credit. We know you have challenge credit. What most salespeople are going to do is they're going to lie to you to get you to do what they want them to do to get you to buy a car. I'm not going to lie to you. Here's what's going to happen. You're probably not going to get the car that you want, but there's another car that you qualify for that we can put you in. Additionally, your interest rate is going to be sky high, and there's nothing that I can do about it because that's what the bank wants to give you. And third, like, your payment is going to be much higher than you want it to be, right? And so you can either trust me based on me willing to tell you this truth up front, right?
Mhm.
Knowing that I'm going to, do good by you and treat you like a human being, or you can go to the place that's lying to you, and at the end you're just going to be in the same situation that I'm in because there's
After
only
your
so
hopes are
many
up.
banks, right? So what I learned how to do very quickly was I was more of like a fuck you to the system type person, like the
Mhm.
banks and the finance, like, but I was more of like, just be real and authentic with people. Don't screw people over. And so, like, having that, I wasn't privileged, and having my, who I was work against me, what I learned how to do was find strength in my weakness. And I learned how to hack the experience to get the most out of it in the quickest, most effective, efficient way possible.
I love that. So you're working at this dealership. You're finding your footing. I imagine you're doing better month over month as you're climbing out of the panic room.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next? You have the baby.
The baby comes. I Just give me a second. The baby comes. I'm in love. I like. I don't know. Like, I never felt love like that in my entire life. I was scared to death, like
Mm,
scared to death. But I also just felt so protected in a way that I couldn't explain to anybody. And I just loved this little girl more than life itself. And I just remember, like, I worked so many hours and I hated it, but when I was home, my daughter was in my arms like every second of every minute of every day. I would wake up at like really early and just snuggle with her in the bed and, like, tickle her stomach and play with her before I went to work. And then when I'd come home, I would just hold her. And so for me, I think I was in fight or flight, right?
Mhm.
Having to take care of, like, just so far out of my element, so far out of what I thought my life was ever going to be. But at the same time, like, no matter how fearful I was, like, this precious little girl just brought something to my heart that, like, nothing else mattered but her. Nothing else mattered but her. So I became the best version of myself that I was able to be at that level of awareness that I had access to at a
Mhm.
very young age. And that was priceless. While most people are figuring out like where they're going to get beer from or where they're going to do this, right? I'm having to figure out like how I'm going to advance my career and how I'm going to do things. And so like that was a gift for me. I stayed at the car dealership. I stayed at the car dealership for a little bit, and then the owner of the car dealership was my cousin. He had hired somebody who was very well known in the car business. And the guy who ran the dealership, the GM, he owned his own car lot. So he was hired to come to get this one off the ground. Once it was off, they hired a new person to come in. He had his own dealerships that he ran, and he became like a father figure to me. The
Mm.
first lesson he really taught me in life, there's three types of people: people who wait for shit to happen, people who sit around wondering just like what's going on, which way did he go, or people who make shit happen. And he told me that like I could choose to create from one of these three places in my life, but that people who make shit happen, it's not something that can really be taught. You either have it within you or you don't, and you can develop it or not. But he said, you got to figure out which one you are. Are you going to wait? Are you going to wonder? Are you going to make this shit happen? And he really took me underneath his belt. So I wanted to go work with him because he was teaching me about life and he was helping me develop my character where the other people weren't. I went to work with him. Um, I was there for about a year or two. And then I don't know, my friend called me and he's like, "Hey, there's this amazing place. It's called New Way Credit Counseling. It later became Debtscape Credit Counseling. It's a nonprofit credit counseling agency, and you get paid a salary, plus you get paid these bonuses and commissions. And it's like Boiler Room. At the time the movie Boiler Room had came out,
Yeah.
he's like, it's Boiler Room. You got to come and work here and check this out." And I was like, okay. And so I made a transition there, and I opened up a whole new chapter in my life when I made that transition.
So let's figure out what's the major stepping stones between that moment you're at this new credit counseling place, your young daughter, to millionaire. Like what is the journey along the way?
Yeah. Yeah. The credit counseling company just taught me to be just like they showed me what happened when you can take raw ability and put structure, organization, and a process around it. Right,
Mhm.
the car dealership was still like a wild, wild
Yeah,
west
it
type
was,
thing, right? But this was a highly organized operation, and like our company was making over like a couple million a month, right? Just doing phone sales, and I worked my way up, and I had one of the highest positions in the company, etc. When I worked there, after like a year of being there, I always excelled. Um, there was a point I quit there. I went back to the car. I'm just giving you real quick. I quit
yeah.
there. I went back to the car business. And then within 3 months of being back in the car business, the owner put me in as the manager, right? I became the finance manager. And then eventually I ran the finance for all the dealerships and the sales. And that's when I really started making like a lot of money. I also was involved with some extracurricular activities still, pulling in some extra income, making extra money, selling drugs. I just love money so much. And then we got to a point where I think I was like 28 years old. So I stayed in the car business,
Mhm.
right? And then finally I got to a place where I just quit. Couldn't do it anymore. Low vibration. Um, I went and I started my own company. I started a debt repair company. Stayed with that for a little while. Did okay, but it was a shipper again, like another just these fast cash shipper businesses. And then, long story short, I met my spiritual teacher. I had my first spiritual experience, and that's where my life really changed before anything else happened. So I think that that might be a good place to
Yeah,
step in. And I told you that
define
story.
spiritual experience.
Yeah. So, I get a call from my stepdad, and he says, "You got to come." He goes, "This is the weekend that me and your mom got divorced." He said, "I left the house. I forgot something. I came back in," and he goes, "Your mom tried to kill herself in the most gruesome way that I could ever imagine. You need to come to the house. She's on her way to, like, you need to come." So I come, and my mom's being taken out, and my mom had she slit her throat ear to ear, and
Jesus.
he found her in the bed, and she got taken out. And so, took some time off work. I'm still, took some time off work, and at the car dealership. Sorry, I was still at the car dealership. Took some time off there, and the girl I was dating at the time said, "Do you believe in energy? And do you believe in energy healing?" And I told her, "I believe in energy, and I don't know anything about it." And she said, "Great. I want you to go visit this woman who works in the back of this bookstore, this spiritual bookstore, and she does this thing called Reiki. And I think that you need to go see her." And so I booked a session, and I went to see her, and that was probably the most transformational experience of my entire life.
So some people may know what Reiki is, and probably a higher percentage than the Gen Pop that would be listening to this. But for those who don't know, um, maybe talk a little bit about what that session was like and what you experienced during it.
Sure. So I walk in. There's a woman who's about 6 foot tall, 6'1", and she's got the
Tall
most.
woman.
Yeah, it's a woman. She's got the most joyful voice that I've ever heard out of anybody. She goes, "Hey, you." I've never met her, but she's talking to me like I'm her best friend. She goes, "Hey, you. Why are you here? What brings you in?" And I look at her and I say, "I don't know why I'm here. I just know that I'm here." And she goes, "Okay, don't worry about it. We'll figure that out soon enough." So she puts me on a massage table, and she puts a blanket over me, and she puts these crystals throughout my body, all over this table. And she goes, "There's nothing you need to do. You just need to relax and receive this energy that's going to flow through you, and you'll have an experience." And I said, "Okay." Within minutes, she turns on some music, she says a prayer, I say the prayer, and just like in Doctor Strange, where the ancient one like taps him and he flies out of his body, and his body's just there, but he's hovering above his body. That's literally what I experienced for myself. And I went on a journey, and I saw like my whole life flash before my eyes, past, present, and future. And I just like I couldn't even believe that it was real what was happening. And next thing you know, she brings me back in my body. She's, helping me get grounded, and she says, "Just take your time." And then I come in, and I'm like, I'm in total shock because I don't know what just happened to me. And she goes, "Normally people are here and they can only receive like this energy for like 45 minutes, but for some reason your soul wanted 2 hours worth of this energy, and you were on a 2 hour journey." And she goes, "Do you have any questions?" And I said no. And she goes, "Okay, well, I have some guidance from your spirit guides that I want to pass along. Do you want to hear?" And I said, "Sure." And
I love that you had
she,
no questions, by the way. That's an astonishing response after 2 hours of being out of your body.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't put words to what just happened. Like literally, like it's just something you see on a movie that you think is never real in this world. But I just had that experience. It's the best way to explain it.
Yep.
So I just had no questions, and she sits down and she starts talking to me, and she's telling me things about my life that I didn't tell her and that nobody else knew. But she's telling me why things have happened, and why this was this way, and what happened here, and why that had to happen. And then she said, "And did you feel during the session where there was like all this energy running down the right side of your leg?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "That's because you had stuff that you needed to heal with your father, and that's cleared now. So your relationship should improve with your father." And I was blown away because I had not talked to my dad in 2 years. not said a word. And for the first time in 2 years, about a week before, my dad showed up at my work and I had my first conversation with him um, in 2 years. And so I was like, okay, this woman's for real. Like, I can trust this. There's something here. We go to finish the conversation. I'm leaving. She says, I have a few very important things to tell you. And I said, okay, what are they? And she goes, number one, you're here to do exactly what I do in this world. What I'm doing, you're going to be doing with others. I know it seems crazy. I know it seems far-fetched. There's nothing you need to worry about. It's going to happen for you at the right time. So don't even worry about it. But just know that you're going to do what I do, and it would support you to start learning and opening up to your spirituality now. I'm like, yeah, right. There's no way that I'm going to do any of this work that this woman is doing. Yeah, right.
Selling drugs and doing weird credit repair ninjutsu, selling used cars to low credit people to, okay, I'm going to be healing people. Got it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Like, that's really going to happen. Right. So then, the next thing she tells me is I'm here to do philanthropy for the trees. And I have a contract with the trees. And that if I give money every month to the trees, that they'll give back to me. It's the law of abundance in the way it works. I don't know anything about the universal laws, right? But she's telling me about this law of abundance and that my contracts with the trees. So she's like, just give like $10 a month to the trees. And if you give $10 a month, they'll give back, the universe will give back to you. And I was like, okay, whatever, sure. And then the third thing she tells me is, good luck signing your lease. And I was like, how did you know I was going to sign a lease? And I was literally supposed to go sign a lease for an office for a new business that I was getting ready to start, as I was going to transition out of the car business. And that was it. And I felt like Kevin Bradley in the movie Limitless when he takes that NZT pill, right? That is how I felt for the next 2 weeks of my life. I was in this high state. I felt like I didn't even know what it was like to be alive until that moment in my life. All my problems went away. My mom's still recovering from trying to kill her, like all these different things, but I'm happier than I've ever been in like my entire life. And I'm just like, okay. And I'm in my office, about 7 days later go by. I'm sitting in my office, I'm at my computer, feeling amazing. And this pop-up comes up from the Arbor Day Foundation. And I was like, oh, trees. She told me to donate money to the trees and they'll give back. And so at first I was like, all right, I'm going to put in $10 and just see what happens. And then something in that moment told me, just put in 100 and see what happens. So I donate $100 to the Arbor Day Foundation. And I swear on my life, 7 minutes go by, and maybe it's 6, maybe it's 5, right? But like no more than 7 minutes go by, and I get a call from my mom. And she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm at work, and I'm glad, my mom's recovering and she's able to talk on the phone. And she goes, "I just want to tell you that I'm really proud of you for starting your business." And she goes, "I know you didn't ask me for it, but I'm going to have $100,000 wired to you within the next 2 days to help you start your business and help you succeed. And like, good luck with everything." And I was like, did that really just happen? Like, this woman told me that if I give to the trees, it's going to come back to me. I was going to donate $10. Instead, I donated 100. Okay. And now, like within minutes, I get a call and now I'm getting $100,000 wired to me. My mind was just like blown. I could never go back to believing the same thing about my life or the world ever again after that experience.
How many people did you tell that afternoon about what happened?
I probably told like 2 or 3. One, for the most part, I didn't really put my business out there in terms of my money, so I didn't want people to know. But I definitely told like my grandmother, and I told some other people, right, that just that I had trusted relationships with. But I wanted to tell the whole world about it, because more than it needing to be about like that I got this money or something like that, I wanted everybody to know that what's possible, right? Like that there's this whole other reality that's possible. And so that experience really ignited my passion for wanting other people to get to experience this magic that I got to experience for myself.
So, did you immediately start researching Reiki and like going on a spiritual deep dive, or did you just sort of like put it to the side, like, I don't even care what that was. All I care about now is that I'm unlocked and let me just sprint forward, because you still have the, let me show the world how great I am so that I can overcome the shame demon.
Yeah. No, I still didn't relate to myself as having shame, even though I was like driven by extreme shame. I still didn't relate to myself as that way. But no, I actually just went as business as usual, just enjoying life, right? And about a month went by and I didn't feel as good. Like I stopped feeling so good. And I was like, oh, I need to go back and see her. And so what happened is I started to go back and I started to see her. And I would start to see her maybe every couple months and get a session, and all this magical stuff would happen in my life. So
Why not go
um,
every day? How did you know to temper it at that frequency? Because I feel like if that happened to me, I'd be like, clear your schedule. I'll be here every afternoon. I don't care what it costs.
I hear you. Here's what did happen. What did happen is I started telling a lot of people about her.
Mm-hmm.
Two reasons. One, I wanted people to have like a magical experience, but two, I wanted to see if it was real. Like, is this
Right.
really
Yeah,
real?
yeah. Can other
And
people also experience it?
yeah, can you go see this woman and have this magic happen for you in your life? And sure enough, everybody who would see her would be like, whoa, my mind is blown. So I felt very purposeful, actually, helping people like open up to new things. I think my life took a next turn when I was guided to go learn more about spirituality, and I went to Barnes and Nobles, and I couldn't find a book that I really wanted. But I'm leaving, and I swear to God, again, divine intervention. I'm walking past the CD aisle, right? This is when CDs, we still bought CDs and things like that. And a CD falls on the ground, and I pick it up, and it's this meditation CD by this woman called Kelly Howe, and it's called The Secret Universal Mind Meditation 2. And I go home and I listen to this CD, and all of a sudden, like, I'm able to have visions, and I'm able to like just connect to myself and feel this energy in a way. And I was like, this is really cool. And so what I did was, so I just started to listen to this meditation, and then I would go to her. The next turning point came when I'm at a networking event promoting my business, and this beautiful young woman walks in the front door, and I see her, and I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. Like, that's who I'm meant to marry. And so she works the room, and we eventually meet, and I'm, not the nicest person in the world. So we connect enough, and I don't know how I got brought up about Reiki, right? And she's like, oh, I love Reiki. So now, because of this girl and me wanting to be with this girl, I sat here and I was like, okay, like, let me get involved with this. And so what I started doing was creating a group for people to meet, young people in their 20s to meet. And what we would do is we would come together, and I would play a meditation from a CD for all of us, and that was it. And we'd all have these amazing experiences. And next thing you know, this group like grew, right? Like this group grew, and it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And one day I just was like, oh, let me call Steph and see. Let me call Starlight. Her name was Star. Let me call Starlight and see if I could bring all these people in a group to her to do a session. And that's when her journey and my journey really began. Is when I started just bringing groups of people to do these group meditations and energy sessions with her at her home.
And her name was Starlight?
Starlight, yes.
This is in Baltimore?
This is in Maryland, yes.
Okay. I would not have expected. That sounds more like a California name, but okay.
Totally.
So I assume then that you and your daughter's mother have split up at this point?
Yeah, we split up. For a few years, we'd been split up. We broke up. We were on and off, right? For about 6 or 7 years, we were on and off. Broke up many times, and it just, we were just better as friends. We didn't have to go to court. We didn't get lawyers involved. Like, I was blessed there, right? Like, everything just happened really peacefully. I paid my child support every month, and we just got along for the sake of my daughter. So it was really beautiful to have that experience with her.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what was the business you were starting?
The business I was starting, it was called Baltimore Credit Hotline at the time. And basically, I was starting, me and my best friend at the time, we were going to start a website. And it was really before websites were up for lead generation. Like that really wasn't even happening then. But what we were like is, look, I knew how to get deals approved for bad credit that nobody else could get done.
Right.
And
Yep.
so, and I was like, I don't want to work at a dealership because I want freedom and I hate the hours. So the idea was we were going to be a car buying service. So we developed relationships with local dealerships, and I would get people to come with us, and I'd say, hey, we're on your side. We're going to get you the best deal. And then I would go to the dealership and I'd say, look, I'm going to get these people. You're not going to get this person approved, but I'm going to get this person approved. Let me work the bank. So I would work the bank, get the deal approved, and then we would take them, and then we would just get paid like $500 for every person we would bring, and they would make the profit on the car. And it was funny because the best customer became the owner of the dealership who I quit. He actually became my best customer, and then in that process, it just made sense for us to go back and work at the dealership. He gave me like a much higher percentage on the total gross of the dealership, and I was making great money. So he got me to come back, and I stayed there until the end of my career in the car business. But
Daniel, true or false? In 2003, I started a company called Car Sultans USA that helped people buy cars, and I was a this this conversation only gets weirder by the minute. I love it. Okay,
absolutely, I love it.
so now you're having these meditation experiences. You've got a new girl that you have magnetized via
Yes,
your Reiki knowledge or experience.
yes.
How long until you're out of the car business, and what does that exit look like?
So at this point, I'm actually out of the car business.
Okay.
I started I had started the credit, excuse me, Baltimore Credit Hotline, the car thing. I met two people which played pivotal roles in my life. They're young people like me. They owned a marketing and branding agency doing just logos and things like that. They did my logo and things like that for this company, and we became friends. I went back to the car dealership for maybe about 8 months. I quit, and then I went to open up the then I went to open up the debt settlement company, right? Did that for a few months. And during that time, I became very close with, their names were Max and Alex. I became very close with Max and Alex, who own this marketing agency. And I decided to shut down my debt company. And I went to work for them selling like websites and marketing and things like that. And while I was there, um, I don't know, that's when I really got into like these meditations for these young people and groups. And then eventually, like in that time period, my mom passed away, right? While I was there, my mom passed away, and had money from a trust coming in and things like that. And so I stopped working, and I got full time into like my spirituality. And I ended up going to a year-long life coach training program, which was a very intense training program. Like today, you see things like you can get your certification online in like 48 hours and shit like that. I went to a year-long program where 1 weekend a month I would spend in a hotel with 20 other people and 10 other coaches. And I mean, it was very intensive.
Mm-hmm.
I had amazing training, and then that's when my journey began.
Are they still doing that as I take notes?
They do it, to be honest. Like I don't know, I'm just very direct, right? When I did it, it was a much different program. Today, uh, it's just not the same people and not the same
Okay.
program. So I'd rather not say their name because
Right.
I don't feel, if somebody went there because of me, I wouldn't feel good about that. So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
Okay. So, by the way, what did your mom do that she had so much money that she could leave it to you in a trust?
It was actually my grandfather. So
Okay.
my grandfather, he was a very, very, very successful businessman and banker, and he owned many companies. And so, but one thing my grandfather did do, which he's well known for, but not really known for mainstream, is my grandfather basically raised money and was the biggest supporter to finance the independence of Israel into Mexico. So I don't know if I'm going to give you the whole story accurately, but my grand apparently Israel wanted to be acknowledged as an independent country, and I
Mm-hmm.
hope Israel. I hope I'm saying this right, please. But apparently Israel wanted to be recognized or realized as an independent country, and I don't think that was really happening for them. But somehow my grandfather got connected with like the prime ministers of Israel or top people in Israel, and he helped Mexico embrace Israel as a independent nation or country or something. And so like my grandfather raised like countless amounts of money to help finance the independence of Israel and Mexico. It was a pretty big deal.
Interesting.
And I probably just butchered that. Unfortunately, I never really got to have conversations with my grandfather because I wasn't old enough to understand or get it or to appreciate it. So I just don't know. So I'm doing the best that I can to explain what I know. I want to
Fair
make
enough.
sure I'm accurate. That's really important to me, is integrity.
So you've jumped off the corporate bridge into the mystical world, let's call it.
Mhm.
And now you are a certified life coach. You've spent a year doing it, very intensive. Now what happens?
Great question. So somewhere on that journey, I'm starting to get clients. And I'm realizing, like, I start to talk to a client and I'm like, hey, I know this sounds crazy, but you want to try something with me? He's like, what? And I was like, I have this woman, she does this energy work. You don't need to be at her house in person. You can be in your house, she can be in her house. What if I said, this is what's really helped me, like, really accelerate? Would you be open to, like, if we did 30 minutes of the energy work and then I did 30 minutes of coaching with you within our hour session? Would you be open to that? And he was like, yeah. Well, that was it. Game over. Because what happened for that person was something that can't even be explained. And then I just started offering it to all my clients. Some of them would say yes, some of them would say no. But the ones that said yes, the results that they created in their lives and at the levels and speeds was just something that just didn't even seem real or possible. And so that became my new practice. Was I partnered with Starlight,
Mm-hmm.
and we that's what she would do. She would do the energy and I would do the coaching, and
And
like
she would
we
do
had
it
some
at a distance.
distantly, yeah. And so that's how we had something really unique to offer people that nobody else was offering. And this is before life coaching was even like this is before life coaching was even
A
like
thing.
well known, right?
Right.
Like when I would go to a networking event, people, what's a like people
Right.
would be like, what's a life coach, right? Yet alone, here I am at 28 years old telling people I'm a life
Right.
coach, right? So, but yeah, so we did that, and like that's what started my practice. And then Starlight said it's time for you to learn, and so she gave me my Reiki attunements and she taught me Reiki. And I'll never forget, I was at a networking event with somebody and I was talking to this woman. Long story short, she was going through something. I offered to do a Reiki session on her. I'd never done a Reiki session on anybody before. So I met her. She came to my apartment. I did a Reiki session with her, and I'll never forget that day. So I'm doing the session. I'm holding her hands because that's what I'm guided to do. And all of a sudden, like, I feel all this energy come in. There's all these voices talking to me, telling me all this information to pass along to her. And my hands start to feel drenched. And I'm like, what is going on? A few minutes go by. I open my eyes. I complete the session. She's crying. Like, I don't even know. She's crying hysterical, right? The session's over. She just looks at me and grabs me and hugs me for like 15 minutes. And she was like, you just brought all the missing pieces together. I've never had an experience like this. Who would have known that you could even do something like this for somebody? Like, and I didn't hear from her for a few days. But I knew after that experience, I was like, this is it. Like, I want to spend the rest of my life doing this right here. And
Mm.
so like that's when I really took everything to a whole other level. And not only did I do coaching, but I did the energy work. Um and then it was like, okay, like I want to create programs and things like that to teach other people, like just get more in depth and more focused with the work with people.
And are you in Maryland still?
Still in Maryland.
Okay. So you're having all these transformative experiences. What's your relationship with your daughter like at this point?
My relationship with my daughter, from my perspective, is good. I realize now, looking back, I don't know that she could say the same thing because we're right now we're disconnected, and we're going through something right now. And
Mhm.
again, I'm really transparent about things. But for her privacy, I want to limit that there
Yeah, of
to
course.
honor where she is. But yeah, at the time, like my daughter's coming with me every weekend. We're spending a lot of time together, and we're pretty close.
Okay. So there's still a gap between where you are and multimillionaire. So how
No,
did
but sorry about that. And yeah, so when my mom passed away, I inherited,
oh,
I became a multimillionaire. Yeah,
got it. Okay. So
I thought I had said that. Yeah.
you rocketed up in wealth
Yes.
and now you're able to do this stuff that's very fulfilling and your mind's getting blown. How are you getting these clients?
Yeah. I don't know. I've always been blessed. Like I just go to networking events and
Like
I walk
late
home.
tip and all those kind of things like the I'm trying to remember
Um,
what the other one's called. BNI?
BNI, I mean, I went to BNI, but more, in Baltimore, there would just be every week, there were like 3 times a week, there would be these events, like a happy hour, business networking, or
Hmm.
this or that. And me and my friend Max, we would just go out to these networking events, and I would just have fun talking shit to people, like having a good time. And yeah, and next thing you know, like just you get one client, you get the next one, you get the next one, and then you help them, and you help them in such a way that nobody else has been able to help them, that like they start sending 3 or 4 of their friends to you, and then you help them, and next thing you know, like you don't have to do anything, and people are just calling your phone saying, hey, so and so said you helped them, can you do the same for me?
And at that point, you had already been through the fire of working as a white boy in Baltimore City and dealing with people in extraordinary circumstances where they're not liking what you have to say, whether it's about their credit because they're trying to buy a car, or their credit because they're trying to avoid bankruptcy, or they're trying to keep some kind of cash flow going so they can exist. So you got to be pretty fearless at that point in terms of just showing up. Because most people's worst nightmare is showing up to a random networking event and you have to go talk to strangers.
Yes, absolutely, I excel. Okay, I excel, and not only do I excel, but i I don't know, like I just say the shit that nobody else is willing to say to people,
Mhm.
and it creates a response.
So, how do you get from Maryland to California?
Long story short, I'm spend these years building this business, working with Starlight, doing the coaching, doing the working. My ego gets the best of me, right? I mean,
As they do.
I have millions of dollars in the bank. My ego gets the best of me. It now becomes about my ego of wanting to be seen as a guru and a fucking expert. And now it becomes about the money, right? And so what I do is I shut my whole practice down and I invest all this money into creating all these websites and these programs and all these things. And every time my transformation was happening so fast, even though I was in my ego, my transformation was happening so fast. I would spend like 20, because back then a website was expensive, right? Like
Right.
not everybody had a website. So back then I would spend
You had
like
to
20.
write code.
Right. Yeah. 25K on a website, and the website would get ready to go live. And I'd be like, I don't like it. Let me put up a new one. Right. Let me put up a new one. So it was
Oh
really
my
my
God.
fear. It was really my fear disguised as rational
Right.
hesitation. Okay. Showing up. And so I wasted all this. So, long story short, that continues. My journey takes me to Sedona, Arizona, right? I buy a multi-million dollar home in Sedona, Arizona. Um, and we're going to do retreats there, and we're going to do these other things there. And I'm down to, I have no clients coming in for the past 2 years because I've just fucked around and traveled and did whatever. And I'm, working on these things. And yeah, like no clients are coming in because I've just turned them all away. And, um, and I'm like, okay, we're going to rebuild this thing. We go to Sedona, Arizona. And that's when shit just went totally sideways. Um,
Now, Starlight
basic
moves with you?
Starlight came with me, and another one of my friends came with me who was going to help us with the business. And, we got there. We had to put more money into the place than I thought we did. And at some point during the journey, within a few months, like the roof went up, which was like around, I don't know, 50, 60K that I had to pay cash for, right? Like the insurance company wouldn't do that. And so like all my money just disappeared. And in addition to that, the person who was managing my finances, my investment, um, had terminal cancer and didn't tell me he had terminal cancer. And so the rule was don't invest into anything that is bad for the planet. And I didn't define that for him. And so he invested into all this oil. And there was a time within like 3 to 4 weeks, I think I lost almost $500,000 um, to the stock market because oil took a tank. And then he had terminal cancer. And so, like, between all the money I put into this house and all these things, I was down to nothing. Like, when I say nothing, I mean I was down to nothing, and it all fell apart.
Well, holy shit. Okay. So the universe is grabbing you by the back of the head and shoving your face into the mirror so that you can have a good look at what happens when you start pointing yourself in a divine direction and are pointing yourself in the egoic one.
Yes.
What is your emotional state like at that point?
It's non-existent because that was my limit. I went to the height of my spirituality. I mean, I'm talking about states of consciousness that like everyone says, "Oh, I'd love to be there," but you really don't because you can't function as a human. You can't function as a human being in these higher states of consciousness. You literally walk out of your house and you go to the grocery store and you can feel everybody's thoughts and their emotions so deeply that it hurts your body to be around people. And so all you want to do is isolate. And then it's like you're able to be in these high states of consciousness and feel so good no matter what your bank account looks like, no matter what's happening. But then, like, somebody calls you on the phone and you need to talk to them, but you don't even want to talk to them because you're so scared to face reality of what's happening, but you're able to make your energy make you feel so good inside. And here's this person, and you're blaming, like, I'm blaming every single person, their fucked up energy, for how I feel inside without realizing that the joke is on me. Okay. And I'm the one who's the problem. And I'm the one who needs to transform themselves. And
So were
so
you Kundalini hacking? Were you basically just overriding your energy channels and just forcing yourself to feel good, irrespective of all the underlying crap, and then freaking out whenever that would start to allow stuff to creep back in?
I don't know how to answer that because one thing that Starlight taught me was no dogma. So we had no dogma in what we learned. She taught me to learn directly from source,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very interesting place to learn from because I'm not using books or processes. So here's what I can tell you about that. All I know is that I can channel this energy through my body.
Yeah.
It comes from the seventh dimension. And that when I do it for myself or in rooms with other people, people say that it feels like they've had like an ayahuasca journey or something like that, just being in this room with this energy. And so to have that ability to do that with the ego that I had, it's just not a good
Yeah.
combination. But for me, what it looked like was, see, what most people don't realize, and that's the gift, is I've developed a method, okay, because of this, but I didn't understand emotional integration. So I kept raising my vibration high enough, and then the lower vibrations would need to clear, but I didn't know how to process them and I didn't know how to sit with them. So I would just call in more high vibration energy, and then I could get myself into a state for another 5, 6, 7 hours. So basically, just like a crack addict would go out, right, and keep smoking crack or keep doing drugs, right? I just keep channeling this energy into my body.
I think
And
people
it,
call it spiritual bypassing.
spiritual bypassing, but it felt like something even different than that because I could put myself into the most blissful states that you could imagine and where like nothing could phase you. Like nothing could phase you.
It's the interdimensional version of just having an unlimited supply of cocaine.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
So, okay, so you're keeping yourself in these elevated states. You're not feeling anything. I imagine Starlight and your friend are probably starting to feel something as the plans are collapsing around you. Do they stick around for the fallout? How does that play out?
So my friend, like, I didn't have money to pay her anymore, right? Like, I didn't have money to pay her anymore. She was living there for free, and we loved her. She's like one of my best friends. So, like, I had to have a really tough conversation with her and say, I'm so sorry. You just moved your life out here and did this. But something really beautiful happened for her. Um, she had some rough time. There was definitely some rough times, disappointment, but she always wanted to live on the West Coast by the beach, and she had a grandmother who lived in Monterey, California, and somehow, some way, like, this opportunity opened up, and she got to go stay in this. She got to go live in Monterey, California, with her dog, which was her dream. So that worked out for her. She moved on and recreated her life there. Me and Starlight were stuck, right? And we were stuck, and um unfortunately, like, the ship went down, and we lost the house, and we had to move on. And Starlight was much older, right? Starlight and I never had a romantic relationship. It was always just like my best friend, my mentor, my teacher. And so, basically, we couldn't afford the house anymore. So the day we had to move out of the house, me and Starlight put as much shit as we could in my truck, and we had to find a new place to go.
Where'd you go?
Um, 3 days before, I had like $1,500 to my name. 3 days before leaving, I got this intuitive hit just to start selling everything that I could on Facebook. And within 2 days, it was like the whole angelic realm came down, and I ended up selling like every single piece of furniture, art piece, everything in this amazing home for nothing. But I was able to sell it all, and I think I had like 16,000, 17,000 bucks, and we had no clue where we wanted to go. Um, so I had all these points at the Westin Lake Las Vegas, right? I had all these points. So we went and spent 3 to 4 days at the Westin Lake Las Vegas for free just to like recoup and figure it out. I had no idea where I wanted to go. We decided to go to Oregon. Starlight and I spent about 2 months in Oregon. All my money ran out, right? Airbnbs, things like that. And so eventually she went back to Maryland to stay with some friends. And there I was with about, I don't know, less than a couple grand to my name. And like, just, I just lost my best friend and my teacher and my strongest support system. And I
Were
don't
you
know what to do.
trying to find Reiki and coaching clients at that time?
No, like, some were just naturally coming just because, I had that reputation and name. So randomly they would come. But during that time, it didn't make sense to me. I would try to go get jobs at car dealerships, right? Because I knew I could make money really quick. And as much as I didn't want to do that, I knew that I had to get back in the game. So I would go meet with the car dealership. They would say, "You're great. You're overqualified. We're going to make you a manager. Like, you can come on, and then we'll call you." Nobody would call me, right? Like, nobody would
Hmm.
call me back. Nobody would call me back. But for some reason, I would just have enough money to come in to cover food and shelter. Like, that was the really interesting thing that was happening throughout
Mm.
this time, is that I was trying to get all this money back, and rather than just like survive. But for some reason, enough clients and enough money would come in just to cover my Airbnb, to cover about $5 to $10 a day worth of food, and that was it. But I that's how I got by for a little while.
So Starlight is gone.
Starlight's gone.
You're alone. You're you're approximating rock bottom, which you have toyed with several times at this point in your life.
Yep.
Are you feeling anything yet?
I'm feeling like just anger, just
Mm.
living every day in pure rage and anger, feeling so hopeless, right? Just not understanding how my life could turn out the way that it was. And then I, like, just, yeah, just disgust with myself, and just like, like, I'm eating Wendy's every day because that's all I can afford to eat, and just feel like total shit about myself. And then something really interesting happened. I found a job telemarketing, and I got a job telemarketing. Long story short, we get an hour lunch break. So I was on a call, I closed the deal, and because I'm closing this deal, I'm a half hour late for lunch. So I go to tell my manager, "Hey, I'm going to go take my hour." He goes, "You can't take an hour." He goes, there's only an hour for lunch. You missed your hour. And I said, wait a minute, you're going to penalize me because I just closed the sale? Is that what you're telling me? And he goes, yeah. And I said, fuck you. So I left. And I said, universe, you have to show me that I have a purpose in my life. Like, you have to show me that my life means something, because I don't want to live. Like, I was really suicidal. Like,
Mm.
and the next morning I wake up and I hear this voice say, go to this park. I'm like, I don't want to go to this park. Go to this park. And I hike. And I'm coming out of this big hike, and here's this big man at the trail. And he goes, can I ask you a question? And he's got this heavy German accent, right? He's this big dude. And he goes, do you know where this cemetery is? And I have no, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have any idea. Long story short, we start talking. We sit down on this picnic bench, and he starts telling me these challenges. And I just hear, give him an energy session. So I ask if he's open. I clear his energy at the park, right? As I'm clearing his energy at the park, this girl is walking by. She starts staring at me. I'm like, she thinks I'm crazy, but whatever, I don't care. And this man just says, you just changed my life. And like, we had this connection, and he goes, please give me your number. And so that was that. We left. I'm leaving. The girl is waiting for me with her car parked right at the trailhead. Parked. She goes, I had to stop you. The energy coming through your body was so strong, I felt it. She goes, what do you do? Like, she's like, yeah, I don't even know why I'm here. I took a wrong turn, but somehow I ended up here, and I was told to do this. And she goes, and then here you are. So I help her with something. And then I get home. The guy messages me. His name was Gunther, right? He messages me, and he says, like, you completely helped me out so much. What's your Venmo? And he Venmos me some money. Well, that meant the world to me, because that $100 that he sent me, that was like, 5 days worth
20
of,
days of food, right?
yeah, 4 days worth of food. So I was like, okay, I have a purpose, right? Like, I have a purpose. And then next thing you know, like, some other people started to call my phone for help.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. Then I hear this voice say, it's time to leave Portland, Oregon, and it's time to go to Mount Shasta. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I only have like $700 to my name. How's this all going to work? And I hear, just go. And so I'm like, all right. So my Airbnb's up, and I get in the car and go. And I'm like, I'm not even going to have money for a hotel. Like, I can't spend $300 on a hotel and all this stuff. And the second I crossed over the Mount Shasta line, a woman who I had sent out a proposal for coaching paid my invoice. Literally, the money came in, and it wasn't much, but I had enough that I could stay in a hotel for a couple days and recoup. And so that was the next stage of my journey. And then a lot of things changed and opened up after that.
This whole story is so remarkable. It's hard to even know how to react or where to go. So
Yeah.
at some point you end up in California, right?
Yeah. How I get to I'm in Mount Shasta, okay? And then I get this idea
Is
that
that
I'm
in Oregon?
from Oregon to Mount Shasta. I'm in Mount Shasta, and I hear this voice tell me, get a group together right now and do these attunements. Give people an attunement, like people would do a Reiki attunement. You can do this attunement to this 7D energy that you channel. Do the attunement. And I said, okay, you're going to have to show it to me. Within 1 day of hearing that, 5 people came, just randomly came, and I did the attunement. And then I had enough money to go to the next place. So I do the attunement, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't have money. Long story short, after the attunement, this woman reaches out to me who came to my house in Sedona randomly. And she says, I've been thinking about you, and I live in Orange County, California. She's like, I need you to come stay with me, right? Come stay with me for a month and help me do some things, and let's talk about business. And I was like, great. Now I have
Is
a
this
place to
Helene?
stay. Huh?
Is this Helene?
No, not Helene. This is a
Okay.
different one. So
There's
now I have a place to
even more
stay.
coincidences.
Yeah. Now I have a place to stay for a month. And it's crazy because every time I try to do something, I get shut down. But if I just let go and do nothing, it just comes right to my phone. And it's hard because I'm like, I don't want this to be happening because I feel like I don't have control over my life and I'm just going to have to settle for like breadcrumbs that I'm getting.
Right.
But really, it's the easiest way to create, and everything that I need is flowing right to me.
So at what point do you go from this sort of like, I'll call it rock skimming the pond, right? Running the bank account down, miracle happens. Running the bank account down, miracle happens. Like I get the impression that you're in a little bit more of a stable situation now. So like what happens that pivots that trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I'm stable because I have a place to stay for 30 days, right? But in terms of my bank account, I don't know if it's safe to spend $5 on food today because I don't know where my next meal is coming from, right?
Interesting.
So, right, I don't know where the next money is coming from. I don't know
You're
how that's
saying
going to
this is
happen.
today or this is back then?
This is back then.
Okay.
Oh, but
So
you're asking me.
so what change at what point does that change where you go from instability to okay, I'm not maybe, deca millionaire or whatever, but like you're on a path where you're not every day wondering how am I going to eat, where am I going to sleep?
Sure. It was 2021, and what I had done was I like people would invite me to stay at their home. So I just became used to staying with people at their home, but I started having a lot more money coming in, right? Like a lot more money coming in. And I have this really interesting experience where I get to my friend's house in Maryland. They have an extra car that they're getting ready to get rid of, and they're like, "You need to we want to give you this car. You need to have this car. We're going to give it to you. $3,500. You don't have to pay us now. Pay us whenever you want." And I'm like, "Really? It's like this Lexus?" And I'm like, "Okay, are you sure?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I take it into the shop to see what it needs, but it needs like $4,500 worth of work. And I'm like, "Fuck, I have like 2 grand in my bank. I don't know how I'm going to do all this." I just hear this voice, just say yes. Just say yes. Just say yes. So I'm supposed to go to Texas for a month. I have places to stay, work to do. I'm not going to need the car. So I tell the guy at the shop, "Look, do the work. I have no idea how the money is going to come. I'll pay you in 30 days when I come to pick the car up. Can you hold it here?" He's like, "Yeah." My friends leave. I stay at their home for a week by myself before I go to Texas. All of a sudden, my cell phone dies and my computer dies. So I'm like, fuck me, man. Fuck me. But first thing I do is go get a new phone. Then I'm like, I need a computer. So I go get a computer. Bottom line is, within 1 week, what I made the whole month before, I made in that week. Like, just clients came out of nowhere. By the way, I'm working off donation, so I'm not even charging. Like, I'm just telling people to pay what feels good, right?
Wow.
So I don't even know how much I'm going to get. I'm just giving my time from my heart to people.
Talk about surrender. I love it.
Talk about surrender. And then within that month, I made more that month, okay, than I had done the whole year before,
Yep.
right? I get the car, I go to Texas, I come back, drive cross country, come back, and on the way back, I hear this voice say, "It's time to start charging money again." And I say, "Okay, I'm doing pretty, like, life is okay right now. You're going to have to show me that it's okay to charge money for what I do instead of work off donation." Next thing you know, I get a text from somebody and we talk, and I'm telling her like how we can help her, and she's like, "Yeah, she's like, Daniel, this feels different than the work we've been doing. I feel like you have to charge me for this. Like, I can't donate. You have to charge me for this." And I'm like, "Okay." And I tell her my rate. She goes, "Okay, that seems fair. You've helped me so much." Now, granted, this is a woman who is paying me like $40 donation for an hour of my time, is now paying me $300 an hour for my time. But she told me that I didn't have to go. Within that
Right.
week, 5 other people came within that week that all hired me and paid me at my rate, and game was over for there, like nonstop, just coming in left and right.
So this is 3 years ago.
Yep.
What do you do differently today? How different is your life and in what ways than it
Mhm.
was 3 years ago?
Great question. I just have unshakable faith and trust in the universe. I realized that money doesn't come from people or what I do. It comes from the universe. When my heart is open, it just comes through people. And I've transformed so much that what I've learned now is that my life is, I'm just sitting in a movie theater, that I am the awareness inside of my body, that I am not doing anything, okay? That I am just allowing myself to receive guidance and receive resources and receive information. And I just follow through with what I need to do with that. I let go of an image or an identity of who I thought I need to be. And I just live in surrender, right? But now what I've learned too is that part of living in surrender is receiving information about things I'm supposed to be intentional about creating, and I'm supposed to take action on it. And that it's not what I'm doing, but it's the place that I do it from. And now when I do what I'm not doing anything different I did when I lost all my money, but I'm just doing it from a different place. And now, like, not only do I have the material, I'm starting to get more and more of that material back, but I have the inner fulfillment to match. And so what I realized is there's one thing I wanted more than everything in the material world, and that's the ability to enjoy it and love it and
Mm.
appreciate it. And so that's what my journey led me to, is how to have it all, how to have the external, right, but with the internal to match. And
So, how did
that's
you get
that's
to a place of peace? Because all that trauma growing up, all that shame spiral happening under a different label, right? Because you didn't see it as that.
Yep.
All of that gets stored. The body keeps the score.
Mhm.
Did you blast it out with aforementioned 7D energy, or did you cry it out? Did you like? How did you expel that heaviness?
I sat and I learned that when I feel like I have to do something outside of myself, change the world, something in my reality to feel good inside, I've learned to take my focus off of the real outside, shift the energy in my body, and then take action, and I'll get the result that I want. So I learned to, yes, to still channel this energy because it is a powerful energy and it does serve a really significant purpose. But I've learned to add the missing components to it, which are the integration work, right?
Mm.
And so now between this energy and the integration and wanting to be in my body instead of wanting to escape, right? And wanting to feel emotions and wanting to feel feelings, that I have the ability to create anything. And I can't tell you how many times I've had nothing and I've done nothing and all of a sudden everything just appears in the blink of an eye. And so it's really just about showing up and receiving the present moment with neutral energy and taking action from neutral energy, from just straight curiosity. And like, just magic happens every time, because not only do I get what I want, but all these other things that I didn't even know that I wanted are right here showing up for me.
For the uninitiated, what does integration mean?
Integration means that you take a piece of awareness and you respond to it in an authentic way, right? That's in harmony with your natural state of being, right? And so we're energetic beings first. We're not human. We have a human body, but we're not human. We're having a human experience. And so everything is created in energy before it's created in physical matter. And so what integration means is when a desire is present, right? When the world is going to be my mirror and it's going to show me what my desire is. And when that desire comes, what I need to do is go within and I need to change my energy to match that desire and then take action, and that desire will happen. Now, I don't have to wait to take action, because you can get to a point. I developed a 5-step method where instead of relying on tools, right, you become the tool. So now life is a living meditation and I am a tool and I'm alchemizing everything as I go. And so I'm creating as I go. So I get to experience and I get to create and I get to have and I get to do it all simultaneously. But it's just a really fun way to be out in the world. It's taking that height of my humanity, excuse me, the height of my spirituality and the depth of my humanity, It's bringing them together in one cohesive experience, and it's operating from that place.
How did you get over the ego's response to realizing it's a movie and it's not in control?
Because when I was homeless and I had literally no money, every week my bank account would get refilled with just enough so I could have the money that I needed to eat. And then there would be like 1 week out of like 7 weeks where I would need to go somewhere and I wouldn't have the money. But then next thing you know, the money would show up just enough for me to get to that next place. And I have like the amount of stories, we didn't even get into them, right? We did on the phone, but the amount of stories that I have on my journey getting from Sedona to Las Vegas to Portland to Orange County to San Diego to Fairfax, California to Maryland to traveling the country, priceless, like priceless, right? And I wish we would have gotten into those stories today, right? Because I think those are the things that are really going to inspire people. I'm not upset about what we spoke about. I think it's all relevant, but like to me, I have it on my arm, right? Celebrate the unknown. And that is my mantra, and that is my legacy that I want to live behind, is that like everything we want lives in the unknown. And when we let go of what and how we think things should be, and we just step into it from curiosity. And the only way you can step into it from curiosity is you have to know I'm not my mind and I'm not my body. So whatever I perceive is happening to me in this moment, the thing that I fear the most of happening to me that I don't want to experience, it's not me, right? It's just an experience. And I'm going to feel it for a few minutes, and I'm going to sit in it, and I'm going to understand how to process it. And then I'm going to get clear on what I've been focusing on. I'm going to get clear on what I want. I'm going to course correct, and I'm going to move forward, and everything just flows in just the most beautiful ways. But I mean, to have $100 to my bank account and do a 1 hour phone session with somebody, and they say, how much should I pay you? Pay what feels good. And to get $700 sent over on my Venmo, which is exactly what I needed to like do some other things, you just stop worrying about, it's not me doing it, right? It's not me doing
You
it.
had
It's
enough
just,
evidence that
yeah,
it was okay.
it's not me doing it. It's just me. Yeah. It's all
So
okay.
what's your work now? Because I imagine that you don't necessarily think you're in full Christ consciousness. So what's the gap? What do you work on these days?
Well, I've developed a 5-step methodology called quantum rebirthing, and it's basically how to operate from a place of being fully integrated into your humanity and your spirituality together in one cohesive experience. It's built on the foundation of everything we've learned about change and transformation is ass backwards. Okay. It's built on the foundation of we are like, you're already healed. Okay. Stop trying to do healing work from the place of you need to heal, and start looking at it from a different perspective that you're already healed. So those are the two main components of it. And believe me, if anybody who's listening to this podcast, right, if all you did was do your healing work from a place that I'm already healed, right, instead of I need this to heal, you will not only get results that you've been trying to get that you can't get, but you will create sustainable transformation that will last you a lifetime, and you will open the doors to the infinite possibilities of the universe that you think are such bullshit because you've been healing for 5 fucking years and you haven't gotten what you wanted, but you don't understand it because there's still these millions of people in the world who are talking about this, having experiences, but you feel so broken because it doesn't work for you. Well, here's the thing. Everybody's journey is unique and different, and you don't know what they were thinking or feeling at the time that they said yes and they did this and they did that, right? But I can tell you one thing, that if you move forward as if I'm already healed, and that the pain I feel here isn't working against me, but it's working for me, and a butterfly and a caterpillar, right? The caterpillar does not morph into a butterfly because it did something wrong. Okay. The caterpillar morphs into a butterfly because it has reached the limits in what it can create and experience in the form of a caterpillar, and it transcends its limits and it expands into a whole new experience. Now, unlike a caterpillar, okay, unlike a caterpillar who feels pain, because that experience of caterpillar to butterfly, the caterpillar is eating the cells from the inside out. The caterpillar doesn't have a brain in the same way that we do. It doesn't have a mind, so it doesn't have a story about the pain. It
Right.
just knows that the pain is part of the process, right?
It gets liquefied. I don't know if people know that. When inside
Yeah,
the chrysalis, it gets completely liquefied. It's not like it just does like these subtle little changes. It goes
yeah,
down to nothing.
right, to one little thread, and then it goes up, right? And so like you're already you're already fucking healed. I'm sorry to say it like that, right? And it's not that I'm insensitive, because if you come and talk to me, I will hold the most compassionate, loving space for you. But it's you're already perfect. You're already healed. The pain doesn't mean shit about you, right? It's a celebration. It means that you've reached a limit in what you can create from your current perspective of self and life, and it's time for an expansion, just like caterpillar to butterfly. And um and so like that's the biggest thing that I'm up to, is really teaching people how to create their lives from this perspective, right? And that's the hardest thing, is like the first gap is getting people to see safeties within, and then how do
Mhm.
I navigate life from an interdependent perspective. I say that there's three essential shifts that we create in our lifetime. The first is when we're born. We go from the non-physical into physical. That's the first essential shift in our lifetime. The second, I'll tell you in a minute. The third is when we go from the physical to non-physical and we die. The second essential of the three essential shifts we make in our lifetime is called a spiritual awakening. It's also known as we start living from our heart instead of our head. But most importantly, it's when we learn to start operating from an interdependent perspective instead of a
Mm.
codependent perspective. And so that's what
Yep.
I've learned, is quantum rebirthing is designed to teach people how to navigate their life from a perspective of I'm already healed, and from an interdependent perspective. And and so I'm working with right now millennial. I'm about to relaunch my offerings. I'm only going to be working with millennial and Gen Z um, change makers, and I'm here to help them really embody their unique leadership journey, and manifest the fuck out of their lives. Right? Like that's what we're here to do.
I love that. So what's your personal practice now? Do you have a spiritual mentor, a guru? Do you do ice plunges and meditation? Like what's on your menu of things to help you ascend to whatever the next level looks like for you?
Yeah, today I take it day by day, right? If I feel like meditating, I meditate. If I feel like not meditating, I don't. My spiritual practice is that life is my meditation, and that I believe that I am one with everything around me. And so the world is my mirror. And so once you learn to be radically honest with yourself, and once you learn how to receive, right? You can sit here and literally walk into any situation and let a stranger be your coach, because
Mm,
you think that person's pissing you off. They're not pissing you off. They're doing you a favor. You have anger inside of your body, okay?
right.
And you are not acknowledging that anger inside of your body. And so therefore this person has shown up as a reflection, as your angel, and you want to get mad at them, but you should be grateful to them, because all they're doing is matching the frequency that you're putting out. And if you can take your focus off them, shift it inside, and clear the energy in here, then your whole world will change automatically. And so my practice is life as a meditation, and life is alchemy. And some days I need to meditate for 3 hours. Some days some weeks I don't meditate at all, right? It's just I love not having to rely on anything other than the present moment to be the thing that
Mhm.
creates my world and my experience.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Is there anything that gives you anxiety or stress or fear?
Yes. So once I've transformed so many times. So every time I've transformed, I've had to start saying no to things that I once said yes to, and I had to say yes to new things. But this life isn't linear. And so there comes a point where things that I said yes to, that have opened up so much abundance and prosperity for me, and freedom and joy, they now like become the thing that limits me. And
Mm,
so in order for me to transcend again, right, I have to say yes to things that I once said I would never say yes to again. And so you get to a point where you transform so much that you actually can never know what's the right thing or not anymore, because now it's like, well, fuck, last time I did that, look what happened to me. But then I said yes to this. But so now if I say no to this is going to go away. And so it's, I think just like anybody else, I fear uncertainty and I
Mm.
fear the unknown, but I've developed the vigor and the versatility, and I become dynamic to know that, like, again, I'm going to run into the pain instead of away from it. I just heard this really cool story. It'll take 2 seconds. So when there's a storm coming, cows know, right? Cows know that there's a storm coming and they start running away from the storm because they don't want to be in the storm. Well, when they do that, they actually stay in the storm longer because now they're moving along with
Right.
the storm. But what I heard is that bisons don't run away from the storm, they run into the storm. And so therefore they get through the storm quicker. And
Hmm.
so that's what I've realized is that run into the fucking storm like the bison, right? Because when you run in it, you're gonna get, it's not a question of if you're getting wet.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a question of what is the collateral damage that you want to experience along the way. And nothing's really damaged its growth. But, you know, yes, I want to sit in discomfort for as least amount of time as possible. And I want to make sure that I maximize my pain to get the greatest return out of it. And so, like, I fear uncertainty and I fear the unknown, because after losing so much and being happy with nothing, the hardest thing to do was to open my heart and keep saying yes to more and more, because the more shit you say yes to, the more complicated your life becomes,
Yep.
because then you have more to lose. But then realizing that, like, oh, it's all good, right? Like, it's all good and the other shoe isn't going to drop and I can continuously grow and evolve. And so, like, just to be fearless in the face of fear, really.
If you could point folks towards a resource, whether it's something you've produced or it's a book or a podcast or article, anything,
Yes.
if what you've said is ringing true, and I mean, surely it's intriguing if nothing else, where would you point people to start walking their way into this path?
Sure. I have two things. There's two things that if everybody just did these two things, I think they would live their best life possible. Number one, it's Ho'oponopono, the ancient Hawaiian healing art of forgiveness. Okay? Because most people think that what we're doing is we're forgiving other people for what they did to us, but that's the illusion and that's false. Okay? Ho'oponopono is not about forgiveness. It's about taking 100% responsibility for everything in your creation.
Mm.
And what the forgiveness is about, it's not about forgiving other people. It's forgiving yourself for believing that what they did to you or what you perceive they did to you means the disempowering thing that you think that it does.
Mm.
Right? So
I
you're
love
actually
it's like
forgiving yourself.
anti-victim. It's anti-victim mentality through forgiveness.
Yes,
I love that.
basically, that's exactly right. And then there's this one quote by Alan Watts, and it's called the backwards law. Have you ever heard of that, Matt? The
No,
backwards
I
law?
don't think so.
Okay,
I
I'm going
love
to read
Alan
it.
Watts, though.
I'm going to read it to you. Um, the idea that the more you want to pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become. Okay? So the more that you pursue feeling better, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place.
Mm.
Again, you're already healed, okay? Which means that you're already abundant. You already have everything you need. You don't need to do anything to have, you just need to open yourself to receive it. But he gets a little bit deeper in this quote. And it says, the more you desperately want to be rich, the more poor and unworthy you feel,
Mm.
regardless of how much money you make or have in the bank. The more you desperately want to be sexy and desired, the uglier you come to see yourself, regardless of your actual physical appearance. The more you desperately want to be happy and loved, the lonelier and more afraid you become, regardless of those who surround you. The more you want to be spiritually enlightened, the more self-centered and shallow you become trying to get there. So everything we've learned is backwards, and it's those are the two things. So if you can learn that you're perfect as is, and that the more you try to change, the more resistance you create, and you don't need to change, and that self-acceptance is the key to the infinite possibilities of the universe, and that forgiveness is the key to everything moving forward. Like, you can't lose in life.
Daniel, it's absolutely astonishingly powerful.
Thank you.
When I first started hearing phrases like "you're perfect just as you are," I found it laughable because we're so poisoned in this Western way of thinking that you have to constantly change and fix what's broken. There's just so much wisdom in everything that you shared.
Thank you.
This is already the longest podcast I've done, and I feel like I could talk to you for 10 hours, but I will save yourself that that additional wear and tear. But I do think that if you're up for it, I'd love to do a part 2 at some point.
Let's do it. If I believe in transparency, right? And I believe that today I felt a little scattered because I think for me, the beginning part of my journey is important. But I think for me, the thing that means the most to me is once I got to California, right? Like once me and Starlight completed our journey, to me, that is the most meaningful part. And that's the part where really the magic happened in my life. And that's the part that I feel is most inspiring. So
Which is
I would
wild
love,
because I guarantee people hearing this are gonna be like, how is that possible? Because you already said 20 miracles that
uh,
people would say are outside their realm of even possible.
yeah,
So let's
yeah,
do
no,
it.
no. But I love it. But I'd love to come back and I'd love to tell those stories because um, we like I just want everybody to tap into the magic that I've tapped into. I am not special, and I don't mean that in like a like to decimate
Self-deprecating.
myself,
Right.
right? Deprecating way. I'm not special, and the more that I want to be special, the more separate and alone that I feel in this world. And but what I do embody is my uniqueness, and what I do own is my power and my message. And my message to the world is like celebrate the unknown, and like I just want everybody to learn that like all the things that they fear and all the things that they hold against themselves and all the things that they're trying to change, like that's part of the human experience that's never going to change. And it's not doing those things that's the problem, it's the place that they're doing them from. And if they could just have the one experience like I did, I know that their life would forever change. And to me, here's what I learned. Like, sorry, I just this is so
Take your
important
time.
that
Go for it.
to me, money is so good, right? Money is an energy. Money is so good. We all deserve to have as much of it as we can possibly have, right? But money and unworthiness are a very dangerous combination. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I had. I had money and unworthiness. And why is money and unworthiness dangerous? Money and unworthiness is dangerous because when we feel unworthy and we have money, we can bypass our whole life experience. But more than that, what we do is we consume. Okay. We
Mm-hmm.
consume things outside of ourselves to fill the gap inside. And when we consume, we get things, it doesn't make us feel the way that, and we throw it away. And we continue down this cycle over and over and over again. And so what we're doing is we're creating in a way that's depleting the planet. Okay. And what I want to do is I want us to create in a way that sustains the planet, right? That grows. And there is that possibility. And the key to doing that, right? We could fight climate change, we could do all that, but guess what? If you're fighting climate change and you're making people who litter wrong, then all you're doing is perpetuating more, right? Because what causes us to overconsume is shame, okay?
Right.
And so we need to learn to find worthiness and have money together. And if that happens, the world will be an inclusive a more inclusive, a more equitable, and more sustainable place for us all to thrive. And that's what I'm committed to is to create that type of change in the world.
I love that. Infinite abundance.
Yep.
And it all comes through your own, I don't want to use the word healing because we are, as you say, already healed, but through our own awakening and our own accountability for being courageous enough to open our heart and stampede into the light, right? Into the places where the real work is to be done. And I think, what was that quote? We're not, I can't remember it verbatim, but basically the notion is that we are not afraid that we're powerless. We're afraid that, we're infinitely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that now in myself, that like the more I awaken, the more afraid I appear to be of like what I could do. And then what's the delta between that and everything I'm doing? And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost horrifying if allow it to really settle in, to think like, oh, we all could be Christ consciousness. We could all absolutely raise everyone around us up and do beautiful works nonstop. And instead, we doom scroll TikTok and go out and drink to excess and, buy a bunch of trinkets and all these other things. Well, I really bless you for spending this time sharing your story, and for everybody who made it this far. I can't wait for part 2. Let's schedule it right away so it doesn't get away from us. And I look forward to people having their minds blown even further on the miracles of California and forward.
Yeah, that's where the impossible became just an everyday occurrence, and that's what I like. I just want everybody to hear that, because everybody has that type of experience available to them.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Daniel, and we'll be back together soon.
Go.